But I want to tell you a story. It's a story that threads its way through the Bible from the beginning, and arguably right to the end, although I'm not going to get to the end bits. So, in the beginning, God created. And God saw that everything was good except the human beings. They were very good. But that's not the end of the story. The seventh day was yet to come. And we read that on the seventh day, God finished his work. He rested on the seventh day. God blessed the seventh day. God hallowed the seventh day. Some people think that the high point of creation, if you like, the goal to which everything is going towards is human beings, which God created on the sixth day. But the story tells us that really the goal of creation is rest. God created all of this stuff, all the stuff we see around us, including us, so that ultimately we might rest with God and rest in God. And many, many, many years later, God is creating a family of people, really, a community of people, a bit like us here, to show the world what it looks like when people live in the way that God wanted them to live. A kind of demonstration, if you like, about what God's kingdom is like. And to help them know what to do, he gave them these commandments. You'll have heard probably about the 10 commandments. It wasn't just 10 commands, but he gave them these 10 commandments to help them to live in ways that pleased God and ways that were good for them. He didn't want to spoil their fun. He didn't want to weigh them down with lots and lots of rules and regulations. But he wanted to show them how they could live well together, how they could all come together and flourish together. Maybe even to protect them a bit from themselves. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm my own worst enemy. And pretty much top of the list that God gave them was this: remember the Sabbath day, the seventh day, and keep it holy. 6 days, God says, you shall labor and do all of your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. Not you, not your sons or your daughters, not your male or your female slave, not even your livestock, your cows, your sheep, or the alien residents, the outsiders in your town. So everybody, not just Israel, God's people, but everyone who came under their care, the sheep, the goats, the fields, are included in this day of resting. God is reminding them of creation. And God is reminding his people that somehow their well-being is tied to learning how to be with God, how to rest with God, and how to work with God. And later on in the book of Deuteronomy, have you ever read Deuteronomy? Some of the adults have read Deuteronomy. In the book of Deuteronomy, God repeats the command that he's given his people. But this time he gives another reason. He roots it in the Exodus. The Exodus was when God rescued his people from slavery in Egypt. when they were in Egypt, they had to make bricks. That was their task. They made bricks 24/7, every day without a break. From the time they got up in the morning to the time they went to bed in the night, they made bricks. The Egyptians liked building things. And to build things, you need bricks. So they made lots and lots and lots of bricks. And it was hard work, and it was hot, and it was just a grim way of being and a grim way of living. So God rescued them from slavery. And when God gives them this command to rest, God kind of says to them, don't let yourself become slaves again. Be very careful not to load up new ways of being slaves. Slaves of work, maybe. Slaves of doing. Slaves to your lifestyle. Celebrate your freedom, God says, and let all of creation share with you. Let there be one day in a week when kings and slaves, when insiders and outsiders, when men and women are equal. This day's for God. Honor this day and enjoy it. And enjoy it. Now turn the clock forward. We're about another 1,000 years on. So it's a long, long time. And God's people are yet again kind of slaves. The Romans have taken over their world, and the Romans rule their world. And they are longing for someone to come and save them again, as God saved them in the past. Someone who would bring rest to his people. Charlie showed this slide last week. It was one of the prophecies. This is one of the prophecies on which that hope was based. And the Saviour would come, and the Saviour would deliver his people. And it says, the effect will be peace, and the result, quietness and trust forever. My people will abide in peace, in secure dwellings, and in quiet resting places. As Charlie said, that paves the way for what we were looking at last week. Remember that verse? Come to me, all you who are wearied and burdened, and I will give you rest. You notice the theme? Going all the way through the story, right from the beginning, right up to Jesus. God's desire that we may know rest. But under the religious folks, the ministers and people like that, the Sabbath had become a bit like a burden. There were all these lists of things you were to do and you weren't to do, and you had to be very, very, very careful in case you did the wrong thing, like picking corn. On the Sabbath, you weren't even allowed to heal. Instead of something that brought life to the people, it had become this thing that was a heavy, heavy burden. Instead of being able to enjoy that day, it was just grim. It didn't enable them to share in God's life. Preachers can do that as well, even today. We can make people feel bad or inadequate for not doing enough or not doing it in the right way, adding burden upon burden. Now, there's a fascinating story in the book of Numbers. Anyone read Numbers? Numbers can be hard work, believe me. But there is a man who is found gathering wood on the Sabbath day, on the day of rest. He's gathering all this wood. We don't know why he's gathering wood. Now, the law said that counted as work. And that the whole community gathered together and they thought, what are we going to do about this man who has gathered this wood on the Sabbath? And guess what they decided to do? What do you think they might have decided to do? Yes? Send him to prison? You might have thought they would send him to prison. Yes, that's a good answer. They decided to stone him to death. Wow. I don't know about you, but to me that sounds a tad extreme, doesn't it? Just tiny bit extreme, a little bit over the top. Surely there are many worse things that you could do. Maybe his house was cold and he was just trying to get wood so that he could warm it up. Or maybe he was just stockpiling wood, a bit like this picture. We don't know, but it kind of feels a bit much, doesn't it? But then again, maybe people who refuse to stop doing who knows what, are actually kind of embracing a way of being that contains a bit of death. If we consistently ignore the rhythm of creation, we risk death. We can see that all around us in climate change. That we've ignored the natural rhythms of creation. That we've not taken care of creation. That we've not given creation rest. And look at the mess the planet is in. We see that in systems maybe that define us by what we can do, by what we can produce, by what we consume. We're consumers these days. We're there to consume things. And we do it 24/7. Particularly now there's internet. You can buy stuff on the internet. There's a guy called Walter Brueggemann, who's a guy I like. And he says, Sabbath is an insistence that we're all neighbours and not commodities. That the most important thing about us is not what we do or what we consume, but the fact that we are part of this great human family. Human beings are made for relationships with God and for each other. I wonder whether the anxiety and stress that is all around us is just another sign of that way of being that embraces death. Stressed at school because of your exams, and everybody piles the pressure on. Stressed at work because there's not enough time to do all the hours. Stressed running around trying to keep everything on the go. And we deny ourselves the ability to simply be with God and to enjoy God. And just as importantly, maybe, to be with each other and to enjoy each other. And when we cut that out of our lives, maybe a part of us dies. And maybe what God wants to say to us today is, stop. Stop your frantic rushing around trying to prove yourself. Stop defining yourselves in terms of what you achieve. Your house, your salary, your exam grades, your kids' exam grades. Stop trying to maximize your pleasure even. Just stop. And be with me and be with each other and learn to enjoy me and learn to enjoy each other and remember who you are.
Have a look at this slide for me. Can you tell me, from your perspective, which side of the middle grey line is darker? The right-hand side. The middle, the right-hand side. I was going to say some people, so I've heard teenagers muttering that they've seen this before. What colour is the grey? Which side of the grey line is the darkest now? It's all the same. So, it's not the line that's different, it's the background that changes how we see the line. So Andy's just been talking to us about rest and Sabbath and what it means to rest in God. So, there we go. So, I've made that really small, go me. So part of our reading today is Jesus talking to Pharisees who are trying to trick him. And this section says, going on from that place, he went into their synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Looking for a reason to bring charges against Jesus, they said to him, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? And he said to them, if any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? He hasn't changed the question. He's asked another question. He's asked, what have you framed your question against? You're looking at just the rules, and I'm looking at just the people. So if we change the way we look at something, it can change what it means. Can we use that in our lives? Can we use the idea that if we change the way we phrase something, it changes the way we see it and we interpret it? So my grandmother did this very well when my dad was a small boy. So there was two options when he was a young boy. The one option could have been, you have to do the ironing, but you get to watch the cricket if you do. Doesn't sound like that appealing an enticement for an 11 or 12-year-old boy on their summer holiday. However, you get to watch the cricket if you do the ironing. Sounds so much better. And that's how my grandmother trained my dad to do the ironing, was that he was allowed to watch cricket all summer holidays as long as the ironing board was up in front of him. Absolute whiz. Warning, this doesn't work with other sports, especially Rugby World Cup finals, unless you want burnt clothes coming out of the other side. By the way, congratulations to all the South Africans in the room for their win yesterday. So, let's see how this translates to Sabbath or Sunday. So, society tells us that Sunday's not important, it's just another day of the week. We're too busy for Sunday, we're too busy for rest days. We've got to be going. Our worth is valued by how much we can do. Rest's for the weak, rest's for when you're ill. You know, the great saying people say, oh, I'll rest when I'm dead. Feels like it's a bit too late at that point to me. But God says, rest in him. Enjoy your family. Take your time. So, when we look at our Sundays, do we wake up on a Sunday morning and think, I have to go to church on Sunday? There's a list of things I could be doing with this time, but instead I have to be at church? Or do we say, I get to come to church on Sunday, to take some time for myself. I actually can't do anything like answer emails, because that's rude in church, apparently. I have to relax and just sit for a little while. Maybe if you have small people in your family, you really enjoy Sunday morning because it's the time that you get to hand your kids over to someone else for a bit and just sit and not have to think about what they're up to. Depending on which way we look at it, depends on whether we see what we're doing as a task, as a burden that we have to do. It's a pressure by society. If we can fail at it. If you have to go to church, you can fail at going to church. But if you get to go to church, then the reward is going to church. So we just played the most ridiculous game. We played a game that was complete chaos, and we're in an all-age service. That game must have a teaching point, because we're in church, and we've played a game, so it's got to have a teaching point. Nope. That game was just for the hell of it. It was just for fun, because we're here to spend time as a family. And actually, playing with balloons makes everyone smile. And everyone enjoys themselves, and it's completely ridiculous, and no one cares. We don't have to make it all hard work. I've been really enjoying this morning watching some of the children kind of move around on their chairs or do whatever they want. Alba at the front here, no one else would have heard this, but I noticed it, was sitting there lounging on the side of her 3 chairs with her shoes on, and her mum said, Alba, no shoes on the chairs. So Alba thought laterally and went, fabulous, I'll take my shoes off. Brilliant. She solved the problem of, I want to lie down, but I can't put shoes on these chairs. So maybe church is where we make ourselves comfortable. Maybe it's where we come and think, do you know what, I'm really tired today, so I'm going to sit in the corner next to a wall that I can lean on and just daydream slightly. But, shouldn't we be listening to every single word that comes out of the person's mouth that's speaking at church? Shouldn't we be focusing? Isn't daydreaming a waste of time? I went to see an author talk about a new book recently, and a member of the audience asked them, how do you come up with your ideas for your stories? And they had a really simple reply. I daydream. This is a really busy man. He's an actor, he's a writer, he does hundreds of things, he flies all over the world for work. And yet he said, we're told that daydreaming is a lack of productivity. But we can reframe that. If I'm daydreaming, I can tell people I'm doing work. I'm working on my next story. So maybe it's okay to sit and daydream. Maybe it's okay to go, oh, do you know what? I missed the last 3 lines of that sermon. Maybe the line you come back in on is the one that you're meant to hear. So how can we make Sundays feel special in a world that tells us that they're no different to any other day of the week and we should be doing loads of stuff with them? How can we change that story? Could you just change the way you look at an activity that you already do every Sunday? Whether it's coming to church or family breakfast or, I don't know, what you wear. Maybe it's just saying, I'm going to relax for 10 minutes. I'm going to leave everything in the house. I don't need to rush around and make it all perfect. I'm just going to relax. Or maybe you're like, do you know what? I want a nap today. I'm going to be what society tells us is selfish and have a nap. They're great. I highly recommend. We are gifted this day of rest. So let's relax into it. Let's unwind for a minute. Waste time, as the rest of the world would see it, and enjoy ourselves.